Sarah, you're a Washington Denzian at this point. Help us understand how you think, for example, 230 will be addressed, if it will at all, in a different way, in the same way, in a more stringent way or aggressive way under a Biden administration.
Yeah, well, they're going to be under more pressure to address it after the Capitol siege. We heard a lot of people talk about ways conspiracies and misinformation played into real world harm. And so we know that the Biden administration cares a lot about it. Remember, Biden also said that he personally thinks we should revoke the law. Now, President Trump, who had a wavering stance but later said we should revoke it, also held this position. But what's different is that the Biden administration, you can imagine, with a Democratic majority in the House and now in the Senate, is going to heed that call from Biden much more than you would hear in the Trump administration. The problem, though, Andrew, when it comes to Section 230, is that while there's bipartisan consensus we need to tackle it, there is no consensus about what we would replace it with. And I think everyone is in agreement that just completely removing the law, which is a very progressive view, would open us up to a lot of different changes in the internet that I don't even know our economy or our national security is ready for.
Hey, Joanne, one of the things, we talk about Section 230 and this idea of liability protection or no liability protection. It's a very theoretical, almost philosophical question, but we rarely talk about the practical aspects of how you could not just enforce it, but how the companies themselves could transition to a place where they could actually control what kind of language appears on their systems, given the amount of the rapidity of the content that's coming out. We all talk about editors, but you think about just could it even work in practice? And I'm curious whether you think between AI and everything else that this is a real conversation or this is something that's actually just impractical.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. I actually do think that this is practical, more practical now than it was 4 years ago, than it ever has been before. And, the reason for this is we have been hearing for years from the tech firms that they are completely unable to do anything about this fire hose of content. And that's why they needed this Section 230 protection, liability protection, because it was just too much. It was too massive. But the fact is, look what's happened just in the last couple of months, where the tech firms really have aggressively cracked down on misinformation around the election, around COVID. They flagged information. And there's a couple of really important points here. And one is, first of all, they are acting as an editor, as a publisher of information by choosing and making these value judgments for the rest of us. That's one issue. And the second is, look, they're proving that also they have the ability to do this. The technology is just exploding in terms of artificial intelligence, in terms of what we are able to do with it. So my guess is, I would agree, it seems very unlikely, despite what Biden has said, that they would actually revoke Section 230 altogether. That would just cause a huge chaos, morass. But I would actually expect to see some reforms. And at the end of the day, my assumption, my guess would be that the tech platforms are going to end up looking a lot closer, at least a little closer, to traditional publishers, where they do have some responsibility for the content that they publish.
Right. Sarah, real quick, before we let you go, in terms of breaking up these companies, antitrust enforcement, Makan Delrahim's replacement has yet to be named. What kind of person do you expect to be put into that role, and how aggressive do you anticipate that they might be?
Yeah, well, Makan Delrahim was interesting. He was very focused on media and content in particular. That was his passion. In fact, he brought investigations into some media mergers that I was completely surprised to see. But I think the replacement is going to be somebody who has experience with antitrust in the private sector. And remember, Merrick Garland, who's going to be in that AG position once confirmed, has that experience. And that's going to bring a lot of credibility to the department's lawsuit against Google. The other thing I just want to mention here is that the FTC is also something to watch. It's had a Republican majority for the past few years. We expect it to have a Democratic majority, which might mean that they'll take a much more progressive view on things like privacy. And the FTC, of course, is the one that's looking into Facebook as well as Amazon.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.